come in tight?
You
Yeah.
can stand right here, Jen.
No,
Yeah.
come over here.
See where you are.
Come over here. All right. We're balanced.
All right, my name is Jeff Anderson, and I am standing here today with a very courageous survivor, Tom Emens, and a number of other colleagues who stand with him and the other survivors with whom we have the privilege to work every day in some way. And we're here because the Diocese of Fresno and the Catholic bishops in Fresno are dirty. They're secret keepers. They have, in the present and for decades, chose to keep secret the names, the identities, the histories of priests who have raped and molested children in the Diocese of Fresno for years. They've also chosen to keep secret the files and the histories of those offenders. And thus they have chosen to protect offenders and give safe harbor to them. Sexual abuse of children happens in secrecy. The bishop's practices in Fresno are designed to keep secrets. We today have released a report. It's called the Anderson Report. And it identifies 43 publicly accused priests who have been publicly accused in the Diocese of Fresno. Now, this report is assembled from data that is publicly available. This is a fraction of the actual numbers that only the bishop knows of priests who have worked in the Diocese of Fresno and violated children. So we released this report and the histories and the assignment histories of each of those that at least have been publicly accused. We can't make a determination of whether or not they're innocent or whether they're not, but we know that they've been publicly accused. And what we don't know is how many more there are that are both in ministry and in the community and at large. Of the 43 we've identified in this report, there are 11 that we know are living and we don't know where they are. We don't know if they're working in schools. We don't know if they're your next door neighbors. We don't know what they're doing. And that means kids are at risk. And so this report is designed to disclose and begin to force accountability and transparency that is so lacking in this diocese and by the choices made by the bishop, current and past bishops in Fresno. Our firm has been working in and with survivors for over 30 years and have been aware of the practices so dangerous in the Diocese of Fresno for over 20. And we tried a case against Monsignor Finnegan in the Diocese of Fresno in 2009, who they had given safe harbor to, who was a serial offender. We also represented a survivor who went to arbitration involving a priest by the name of Swearingen. That's right here, Eric Swearingen. And in arbitration, a judge decided that Swearingen had violated, molested a child, a youth, and determined that to be a fact. The bishop, then Steinbach, made a conscious choice to keep Swearingen in ministry. And he still is, and he's currently a good shepherd in Visalia. And I point those instances out as the very dangerous practices and the dangerous choices being employed by the Catholic bishops in Fresno, because they are protecting themselves and those that have hurt the children instead of protecting the children by the choices they are making. And to this day, they have not released a list of those they even know to be credibly accused. The former bishop said they were pondering it while kids are at risk and holding on to these secrets. So we urge the diocese to begin to come clean, and we will keep urging them and reporting on the risk as they become known and aware to us. I'd like to invite you, Tom Emens, to step here to the microphone. And first, by way of introduction and background, Tom Emens, you are a survivor of sexual abuse by a priest by the name of Mohan.
Correct, yes.
And some months ago, you made a choice because you came to us and said, I want to do something to clean them up and make them transparent. And at that time, you brought an action using your name, even though you could have used a Jane Doe or a John Doe, in your case, a John Doe, but in your name against every Catholic bishop in the state of California, including the Diocese of Fresno and the bishop in it. And he sued the bishop of the Diocese of Fresno and the other Catholic bishops in California because?
I just want the truth. I think that's what every victim deserves. And we need protection for our children. In my case, when I came out with my story about 3 years ago, I had a lifetime of questions. And when I started asking questions, I realized that I wasn't going to get any answers. And I was also stuck because the statute of limitations in California has run out for me. So this action against the bishops is really to seek justice, not just for myself, but for other victims that are nameless out there. And I see it as a protective move for the children of California. And I believe that as it's moving through the court systems right now, I think we'll see how it goes. But it's a positive move for me. And I think it's a very positive move for all victims. So that's why I'm doing it.
And to you, Tom Emens, we're grateful for you standing up for the children and for the truth and taking that courageous action in suing both the bishop in the Diocese of Fresno and all the other Catholic bishops in California in what is called nuisance. And that is for maintaining a public hazard by keeping secret the names and identities and histories of offenders and the top officials who have been complicit in those crimes, and the top officials who have been complicit in those crimes. So that action that he has brought, that the bishops tried to get dismissed and thrown out of court, and which has been now denied and allowed to proceed, the Catholic bishops, including the bishop in Fresno, has now appealed. But he's seeking accountability and transparency, and that is to protect the kids. So thank you, Tom Emens, for having done that. Tom Emens, you mentioned that the statute of limitations had kept you from being able to do anything. And one of the things we do want to mention is the bishops and the Diocese of Fresno have also just recently offered a plan called the Independent Compensation Plan, where survivors can come forward and get compensation by people appointed by the bishop. We want folks to know that plan we call the bishop's payout appeasement plan. And why is that so? Because it's a plan that we have seen used by the Catholic bishops in New York and other states when they saw a change in the law coming pertaining to the statute of limitations. And so to cut short some of the claims that they knew would be coming, that would force them to make disclosures, they use this plan. And so this plan, we want folks to know, is going to be made available by the Catholic bishop here. But we also want folks to know that there is a law being passed and moved through the legislature in California, a Child Victims Act, if you will, that gives survivors an opportunity to bring a legal action and force this diocese, the Catholic bishop, to come clean and hold them accountable so they are required to be transparent. And so Mike Finnegan, why don't you just speak to that?
I'm Mike Finnegan, one of Tom's attorneys in the nuisance lawsuit. And the new law, the bill that Jeff is talking about, is Child Victims' Rights and Cover-Up Prevention Bill. It's Assembly Bill 218. And the bill a couple months ago already passed the Assembly 64-3. And now it's in the Senate. Right now it'll be in the Judiciary next week. And what this bill does, three things. It gives survivors an opportunity, it gives them a chance to go into court and hold their perpetrators accountable, expose them, and also any institutions that permitted it, covered it up, and concealed it. And that time period, what AB 218 does is provides for the next 3 years, from January 1st, 2020 to January 1st, 2023, for survivors to come forward, and they can do that anonymously, not using their name, Jane Doe, John Doe. That's the first thing that it does. Second is that it raises the age from 26 to 40 after that 3-year window is done. And then also it provides for more damages, triple damages for cover-ups. And so what this bill does is it deters cover-ups so that institutions can't cover this up, conceal it, move these people around like they've done in the past.
Can you spell your last name for us, please?
Finnegan, F-I-N-N-E-G-A-N.
The names are spelled over here.
Thank you.
And so what needs to be heard and understood is that this compensation plan being offered by the bishops is being done just like those in New York when they knew that this bill was going to pass and likely to do so. And they did the same thing in New York that the bishops are doing here by this compensation plan. So there's three things that need to be addressed here. First, they got to come clean with the names and the histories, and we're making our best effort to make this disclosure today in the Anderson report. Two, folks have to know that this compensation plan is really designed to keep secrets and hide crimes and those that commit them. And three, there is hope for survivors through the Child Victims Act and Assembly Bill 143, 218, that's moving through the legislature in the Senate right now, that opens up an opportunity for survivors to anonymously come forward, keeping their privacy, but identify the offender and any institution or employer that made a choice to protect that offender. And that is likely to become law soon. So there is a dark and dirty practice in the Diocese of Fresno of secret keeping. There is hope because the legislature is moving, and there is power in the truth of the survivors who stand with us, and Tom Emens here today. Mike Reck, you're one of the lawyers working with our firm here in California and with survivors. What else needs to be said about this?
Thanks, Jeff. My name is Mike Reck. I'm one of Tom's lawyers here in our California office. I've also been working in our office in New York, assisting and advocating for hundreds of survivors in New York who have been exposed to this compensation plan. This compensation plan announced here in California just weeks ago is not novel. It is not new. It is a replay out of the playbook by the bishops, and it's being run again here in California. We've represented hundreds and hundreds and still represent hundreds of survivors in New York. Of those survivors, over 150 chose to participate in the plan. And there are aspects of the plan that merit analysis. And there are some survivors who could benefit from it. But the dangers in the plan lie in the misinformation. There are two major criticisms of this plan that survivors should know and need to know in order to recover, to regain, and to utilize their power. Because the survivors did nothing wrong. The survivors had no choice when they were children, but they have choices now. And to those survivors, you each need to know that there are two major criticisms of this program. Number one, it oftentimes excludes more survivors than it includes. These programs, while touted publicly as helping survivors, exclude those survivors hurt by members of religious orders, which means priests who travel from diocese to diocese and staff the facilities here in the Diocese of Fresno at the request of the bishop here in Fresno, but whose offenses are excluded from the program. Lay teachers who offended against children in the Catholic schools are excluded from the program. Youth ministers, coaches, people working in the Catholic facilities are all excluded. So this program, in fact, does not reach out to all survivors. And those survivors need to know whether they qualify or not without having the church officials who have been covering this up dictate this to them. Second, this plan is not transparent and it is not accountable. Information flows only one way. That means that survivors who choose to participate in this plan, either by themselves or with lawyers, they are allowed to have advocates, must disclose the abuse and the offender and the effects to church officials. And in return, church officials make no disclosures about what they knew or when they knew it. So the true accountability in these programs remains hidden and remains secret. So survivors who are considering this and may find this an option need to know the options exist. And we know this because we've seen this playbook before. We've seen it run by the bishops in other states, and we've seen it run by those bishops immediately before survivors' rights are reinstated, like Mr. Finnegan discussed just a minute ago.
So we want survivors to know it's time to share the secret. You can do so in absolute privacy as a Jane Doe and a John Doe. You can choose to have a claim shepherded through the compensation plan that's being offered by the Catholic bishops. You can also choose to elect to make sure that you know your rights and that your rights can be protected by the legislation moving through the legislature right now. So it's time for disclosure. It's time for the Catholic bishops to be held accountable and be made to be transparent. And it's time to stand up for yourself, knowing that you have a choice and you can have your own identity protected as a Jane Doe and John Doe, whatever choice you exercise. And so it's also time for the Latino community to know and hear from Beatrice. Where are you? Beatrice, please step forward and summarize some of what folks need to know in the community.
Bueno, primeramente queremos decirles por qué estamos aquí. Estamos aquí porque la Diócesis de Fresno no ha dado una lista de los padres acusados de abuso. Y no solamente los padres, sino directores de las iglesias católicas, de las escuelas. Esos son miembros de una orden religiosa. Bajo este plan de compensación, esos tipos de miembros que han trabajado en las iglesias no pueden ser incluidos. Entonces, si un niño fue abusado por un maestro de música, no puede participar en ese programa de compensación para las víctimas. Entonces, estamos aquí, como les dije, para pedirle a la Diócesis de Fresno que se confiesen, que sean transparentes y que se hagan responsables por los crímenes que han hecho los padres o miembros de órdenes religiosas que han cruzado por la diócesis, que ellos revelen esa lista. Y esta información que está aquí está públicamente para quien quiera buscarlo. Son de casos ya abiertos, son de casos cerrados, pero la diócesis de Fresno no ha dado ninguna lista. Y esos son casos de los cuales nosotros sabemos, son 43, pero pueden haber muchos más. Y lo que es muy interesante de esta diócesis es de que varios, si se fijan en el libro, son de órdenes religiosas. Entonces, si una víctima decide participar en ese programa, no puede meter una demanda o reporte porque ese padre fue de otra orden religiosa. Entonces, para decirles poquito del programa, lo malo de este programa es de que es solamente un programa que le beneficia a las diócesis, no le beneficia a la víctima porque no les da voz a la víctima. Lo que pasa con este programa es de que si una víctima decide meter un reporte, ya en el futuro no va a poder meter demanda con un abogado. Entonces, les estamos diciendo ahorita que tienen la oportunidad de decirle no a este programa, que se esperen, porque hay un proyecto de ley que está en el Senado ahorita, es el AB 218, y esperamos que el gobernador Newsom lo firme, y en cuanto lo firme, va a abrir una ventana de 3 años para que las víctimas puedan meter una demanda. Y ese proyecto de ley sí les va a dar voz a las víctimas, porque van a poder las víctimas preguntarle preguntas a la diócesis que por qué encubrieron el crimen de los padres, y no solamente esos, ellos saben dónde están, pero no quieren dar el paradero. Entonces, por eso estamos aquí y decirles que, por favor, si tienen un secreto que compartir, que por favor nos llamen y participen o se esperen para que pase esta ley, se llama Ley de Derechos para la Víctima, y aprendan más de este programa antes de que se apunten para participar. Muchas gracias.
Thank you, Beatriz Mendoza. Beatriz is a survivor advocate that works with us to help survivors in healing, in finding hope, in taking action, in sharing the secret safely with us, and in recovering power, and then also doing what we can to protect survivors from further harm and use the legal system to expose offenders, to expose those that are complicit in these crimes, and to protect kids in the future. Thank you, Beatriz Mendoza, for your advocacy, working with us in this area. We'll take a couple questions and then they'll have a couple closing comments. Any questions?
Mr. Anderson, you're saying there was 43 publicly accused priests. How many of those priests have been actually convicted by a DA in the county of Fresno or throughout the diocese of boundaries? You're publicly accused, there's 43, but how many have actually been convicted, have been charged with a crime?
Well, the answer to the question is how many have been convicted? And the answer is we don't have the exact data there. The Catholic bishops do. What we do know is some have been, and some have been found to have committed these, either in a civil court, such as Finnegan, or in a criminal court, and some are pending, such as against Harrison, and I think it's Flores. And so the answer is we don't know, but what we do know is each of these identified in the report is somebody against whom there's been a public accusation. And a more fuller truth is in the hands and the possession of the Catholic bishop. And it's the Catholic bishop that made the choice to hold on to that secret that requires us to release this report and other ones like it, and to identify at least the public information that is available to us, and to make that known to the community, to at least alert communities to risk that are out there, that may be out there. And until the Catholic bishops do come clean and transparent, this is what we can do to protect kids and alert communities. This is what we can do. But the bishops can be made to do more because they're the ones that are keeping the secrets.
Now, are these public accusations by the victims themselves or?
This is taken from the website called Bishop Accountability. That is a comprehensive database that is publicly disseminated. And then we take other public reports that have been made and assemble it in this report, and then assemble the histories of each of these people and their assignments from the official Catholic directory. Those are records publicly made available by the Catholic bishops across the country. So we use public data. We can't make determinations individually at each of these. We can say these priests have all at least been publicly accused, and it's the bishops that know more about who has really done what and who was involved in the cover-up of that.
Mr. Anderson, in regards to these accused priests, in regards to Raul Diaz, in regards to Mr. Harrison, are you representing any of these alleged victims that have accused Mr. Diaz and Mr. Craig Harrison?
We do not.
What about Flores?
We do not.
So
We
why was your law firm interested in this matter in regards to the Diocese of Fresno? Why spend all the resources in bringing a press conference and forming this report? What was your interest of this?
Our interest is, and for 36 years, I've been working with survivors of sexual abuse, and for 25 across the country, and for 25 years, I've been working with survivors of sexual abuse and aware of the dangerous practices in the Diocese of Fresno. I brought a case to trial involving Monsignor Finnegan in 2009, in which we exposed the dangerous practices by then Bishop Steinbach and his predecessors and his successors, and the same practices we exposed in 2009 on behalf of two courageous survivors I represented then are still in place today. And the reality is we represent a large number of survivors here in the Diocese of Fresno and across the state. And our firm does, Mike Reck, Mike Finnegan, and the other folks we have assembled here today. And so we have a keen interest with and for each of these survivors to do what we can to protect kids, to alert the communities to this danger, and to disseminate the information, at least that we know is publicly available and that we have unearthed and excavated as we work.
The Diocese of Fresno says that this plan is to help protect these victims' privacy in regards to, and they've gone for a law already, this is a program that can protect their privacy. Do you believe that?
Well, the Catholic bishops have said the compensation plan they're offering protects the victim's privacy. And they say, unlike litigation. So that is misleading and deceptive. The reality is that the plan does protect privacy, but we protect privacy in litigation as well. And so in litigation, if a survivor sues under the act that is about to be passed or one that is brought today, the survivor's privacy is protected. 95% of the survivors with whom our firm has worked across this country, their privacy has and will always remain protected. And those that are whose names become known is because the survivor made the choice. Tom Emens, you made the choice to use your name, correct?
Mm-hmm.
And you also knew that you had a choice to be a John Doe, correct?
That's correct.
And you exercised the choice.
Absolutely.
So the fact of the matter is that they're luring people into the plan under the ruse of privacy, when in fact a survivor's privacy is always protected and never disclosed through litigation or by us or anybody else involved in it. That's a fact, and that's why the plan is both misleading and deficient. Thank you all. Thank you to the survivors. Thank you to you, Tom Emens, and we're grateful to you. It's time for transparency. It's time for accountability. It's time for the bishops to come clean, and until they do, we're grateful to the survivors for standing up and standing with us every single day.
Can you just talk more about this 2009 case you're citing that you came out here to Fresno County to represent? What case are you talking about, and who was the accused priest?
It was Monsignor Hertigan, and we tried a case here in Fresno in 2009.
Were you successful?
We were successful in the jury finding that the abuse had occurred, and that it turned out to be a time-barred claim, and the jury came back determining that the statute of limitations, even though there had been a cover-up of Hertigan and a long-standing knowledge of his abuse of kids, the jury determined and answered the question on the statute of limitations that it was a time-barred claim, so the survivors did not recover damages, but the survivors in that trial did expose the long pattern and a long practice by Bishop Steinbach, Bishop Madera, and the prior bishops that went back 15 years. Thank you all.
Mr. Anderson, can you just comment in regards to the recent news in regards to Raul Diaz, in regards to Harrison? We're seeing all these priests come out with where these alleged victims are coming out and saying, hey, I was, sexually, alleged in regards to the Monsignor Craig Harrison. Can you talk more about that in regards to this recent news about the Diocese of Fresno, and what should they do?
Well, we've been following the disclosures made involving both Harrison and Diaz and others like that across the state. And to the survivors that are reporting these to law enforcement and disclosing these secrets long held to others, we applaud them, because without the survivors sharing those secrets and disclosing them, those kinds of things never become known. And what we do know is that Diaz and Harrison are recent examples of how the diocese has chose to handle accusations, reports, and claims of sexual abuse, which is largely to keep it more secret and more silent and work to protect the accused offender, whether it's Harrison or the accused offender Diaz or the accused offender Hertigan or the accused offender Swearigan, who is still in a parish. And it really is a very recent demonstration of the patterns and practices employed by the Catholic bishops here in the past that are being employed in real time today. So thank you all, and we will continue this journey to force transparency and accountability every day in some way, armed with the courage of the survivors, Tom Emens, and all those who stand with us, most of whom remain private and confidential. Thank you all.
Do you know how many of the priests that you have listed here are still in some of the working churches here?
The one that we do know is still working is Eric Swearigan right here. And we know that he was found by an arbitrator to have committed child and sexual abuse. A judge found him to have committed child and sexual abuse. And we know that then Bishop Steinbach made a decision to keep Swearigan in ministry, notwithstanding a determination. And that he has continued in ministry and is currently at Good Shepherd, and thus in good standing. And that's a perfect example of how dangerous these practices are. And a part of why we are so alarmed as we disseminate this information and publish this report. We are alarmed. We're scared for the safety of the kids, because the practices employed by the bishops here have been so careless, so reckless, and so designed to protect themselves and offenders among them.
And he was convicted in Kern County?
Yeah, he was actually found to have committed the child and sexual abuse in an arbitration, where a sitting judge made the finding as a judge would, and then made that known and to the bishop. And that case was settled by the bishop and the diocese, but they continued Swearigan